Before Digimon Ghost Game was announced, back when the Digimon Adventure 2020 reboot was still airing, there was a moment where we kind of thought maybe we'd be getting a season 2 of 2020. Needless to say, Adventure 2020 ended at episode 67 and Toei immediately moved on to Digimon Ghost Game. But what if we followed up Adventure 2020 not with Ghost Game but with a sequel season like the original Adventure 1999 going into 02? Toei may not be interested in exploring what a second season of Adventure 2020 would have looked like, but I certainly am. So this is my pitch for Adventure 2020 Season 2 or 02 Reboot. Let's call it Digimon Adventure 2022. There are so many places we could take this, so let's first establish some ground rules. Number one, this is a sequel series to Digimon Adventure 2020, meaning we are operating on the canon, events, and lore of that universe. Therefore, for this pitch, we're going to pull from as many loose threads and ideas from 2020 as possible to make this feel like a true continuation of that show. I'll give you a little teaser now. The lost holy Digimon from Adventure 2020's Ancient War are going to be key to our new season, but more on that later. Rule number two, this is in fact going to be a 02 reboot story, not continuing adventures of 2020 Tai and the gang. Meaning TK, Kari, Davis, Yoli, and Cody are the core cast. Maybe one day we'll discuss a what-if story about Tai and friends' adventures continuing after episode 67, a hypothetical episode 68 and onward, but this video isn't that. Without further ado, let's get into my pitch for the 02 reboot, Digimon Adventure 2022. The setup, the train. The year is 2022. 2 years have passed since the historic Tokyo digital crisis that saw a ton of tech malfunctions in Japan's biggest city, including the runaway train incident from episode 1 of Adventure 2020. For this reboot project, I'm choosing to make this runaway train incident much more important than we were originally led to believe. Let's make it so that this train is the new Heightened View Terrace incident. Whereas in the original 1999 Digimon Adventure, the children who witnessed the Greymon versus Paramon fight would become the Digidestined, what if the Tokyo digital crisis and the train incident created the next generation of Digidestined? We make it so that Kari wasn't the only child on that runaway train, and the other child passengers all became chosen children on that day. We didn't see them in episode 1 of 2020, but we'll make it so that Davis, Cody, and Yoli, plus some other kids we'll meet later, were also on that runaway train with Kari. So now the runaway train is the inciting incident for the 02 kids connecting to the digital world. On that day, every child on that train was assigned a future Digimon partner, even if they wouldn't meet them for quite some time. Gatomon for Kari, Patamon for TK, Avimon for Little Davis, Armadillomon for Little Cody, and Hawkmon for Little Yoli. More setup, the Holy Digimon. Remember our number one ground rule that this show has to respect Adventure 2020's world building? One of the elements of the 2020 reboot I was surprised to not really see go anywhere was the multiple teases of the other Holy Digimon from the Ancient War. If you'll recall, TK and Kari's Digimon, Seraphimon, and Ophanimon were 2 of 7 ancient warriors who fought off Millenniummon before the events of the series. We got to see Slash Angemon, Clavis Angemon, Valdermon, Razielmon, and Cherubimon in addition to Seraphimon and Ophanimon. I always thought it was a huge missed opportunity that only 2 of 7 Holy Digimon had any real relevance to the present storyline, so I'm proposing my biggest change to 02 original canon, that the 02 kids Digimons are the reincarnations of the Holy Digimon we saw in the flashbacks of 2020. And it's actually not even that big of a change, since Digimon Adventure 02 described Vmon, Hawkmon, and Armadillomon as 3 Digimon of ancient times who were sealed away to be awakened in a time of crisis. Looking at our Holy Digimon from Adventure 2020, we'll make it so that Vmon eventually evolves to Slash Angemon, Hawkmon to Valdermon, and Armadillomon to Clavis Angemon. No, there isn't a precedent for these evolution paths, but this is Digimon we're talking about, where endless branching evolutions are possible, and this is a reboot. If Hawkmon can turn into Orcamon in Digimon Ghost Game, then Vmon can have Slash Angemon as a Mega. Adventure 2022 will still have Armor Evolution and Jugress Fusion, as those are staples, but we'll know that the endgame is our new Digimon becoming the Holy Megas they once were. Kind of like how we got Omegamon's existence teased early in Adventure 2020 before working our way back up to him for the grand finale. Okay, so with Patamon, Gatomon, Vmon, Hawkmon, and Armadillomon accounting for 5 out of the 7 Holy Digimon from Adventure 2020, what about the last 2? Funny you should ask. Cherubimon and Razielmon are of course Megas for Lopmon and Meikumon, Digimon that are associated with Adventure canon characters Willis and Meiko. I'm proposing later in the series we don't just get Ken Ichijoji as the 6th Ranger figure like in the original 02, but we also get Willis from Hurricane Touchdown and a reimagined take on Meiko from Try. This would play out like a blend of the Hurricane Touchdown film plus the World Tour arc in the original 02 kind of mashed together. So we leave Tokyo and we meet Digidestined outside of our normal setting, like how Adventure 2020 adapted elements of our war game into its plot. I want to borrow from and integrate the 02 movies and other components of Adventure. Like the World Tour arc of the original 02, we'll play with the idea that there are Digidestined outside of our main cast in Tokyo. We'll make it so that Willis is in America and Meiko is in the Japanese countryside, but a few years ago, during the Tokyo digital crisis, they were both in Tokyo with family on vacation during that crisis, and they and their families were on the runaway train as well. Sure, maybe Maybe it's convenient that Willis and Meiko were on the same train as Kari and the others, but Tokyo is a massive tourist location, and we'll just embrace the whole destiny angle of chosen children / digidestined to accept that this is where the team was supposed to be in that moment. Ken and the Digimon Emperor persona will still be a part of our 02 reboot and will go relatively untouched, which would make the new 02 complete team Kari, TK, Davis, Cody, Yoli, Ken, Meiko, and Willis. That's 8 kids, which mirrors the first season of Adventure having a cast of 8 kids. I don't see Willis and Meiko being core like every episode characters, but more like Kenta and Kazu type, kind of secondary, tertiary, digidestined who are relevant but clearly like tier 2 tamers, if that makes any sense. Just as a way to make it so the cast isn't too bloated. So that's my core pitch so far. The original 02 cast plus Meiko and Willis are partnered with the reincarnations of the ancient holy Digimon. I think it works that Ken's Wormmon is not part of the holy Digimon from the past, as it could be this nice lesson that even people who aren't necessarily chosen children, you know, they're not destined for greatness, but they can still do the right thing. Now, you're probably wondering, what about the main characters from Season 1? Where are the Adventure 2020 versions of Tai, Matt, Sora, and the others? We'll get to that next. I can't wait to share my pitch with you, but before that, let's take a minute so the sponsor of the video, Baiyi, can say hello. If you're an anime fan, manga fan, even a K-pop fan, you may have heard of Baiyi. It's a proxy shipping service, which means they make all kinds of Japanese exclusive merch available to you wherever you are on planet Earth. When I was a kid, there were a million toys and games I'd see online but knew I could never have because they were only available in Japan. Baiyi is solving past me's problems by letting fans all over the world shop on Japanese storefronts like Rakuten, Mercari, and Amazon JP. You select what you want, then Baiyi essentially purchases it on your behalf and sends it to you wherever you are. I used Baiyi to buy extra DIM cards for my Vital bracelet so I could add to my digital monster collection, and I'm sure you can find cool merch based off of things like Digimon 02, the upcoming Digimon Survive, Ghost Game, and plenty other anime. There's even a special offer for viewers of this channel. If you sign up to Baiyi for the first time using the link in my description, you're going to be getting a 2,000 yen coupon for your first order. That's around $20 US off that order just for signing up and just for being a fan of this channel. It's never been a better time to sign up, honestly. Thanks to Baiyi for sponsoring the video. Now back to the discussion. The old cast. So I talked about the new characters for 2022, but what about the characters from the first season? We need to find a way to de-emphasize them while still respecting their accomplishments and power from the previous season. In our Digimon Adventure 2022, we are 2 years past the end of the first season, and the original team still have their Digimon but are mostly broken up at the start of the series. Our show is set during summer vacation, and the old team is using that time as follows. Matt and Gabumon live in the countryside, Mimi and Palmon are living in New York, Joe is in summer school during the season, Sora is perhaps at soccer camp. Izzy is actually going to be relatively reachable to the group, somewhat of a mentor, the guy in the chair, and a real bridge connecting seasons 1 and 2 of this reboot verse. It was Izzy and Tentomon narrating the episode end segments in Adventure 2020 after all, and Izzy was developing the digital gate in the finale of 2020. So I like the idea that while the rest of the original team is scattered, one member is still in Tokyo and can be the guy in the chair for the next generation team. Now you'll notice I didn't touch on where Tai and Agumon are in Adventure 2022, and that's because at the start of this series, Tai and Agumon are missing. We ended Adventure 2020 with Tai and Agumon in a field in the digital world, and just before that we saw Izzy and Mimi developing a digital gate project. Let's say Izzy and Mimi were the software developers and Tai was the beta tester, volunteering to make trips back and forth between the human and digital worlds. Tai and Agumon had been making successful trips back and forth for quite a while until one day in 2022 they just never returned. This will give our new show an immediate sense of mystery and urgency. We can also go the Ghost Game route like with Hiro's father and find a way to make it so it's mysterious but not like a life-threatening mystery. Maybe we get a message or two from Taichi every now and then so we know he's not like kidnapped or dead or something. An easy direction to go is that the Digimon Emperor captured Tai, or perhaps Tai is investigating the Emperor, the newest threat to the digital world. This whole Tai is missing idea is a bit of a response to all of the quote too much Taichi comments regarding Adventure 2020. You thought there was too much Taichi? Okay, well now he's vanished, and that's the kickoff point of season 2. This way we also can't rely on Omnimon since Tai is absent and Matt is in the countryside. So I shared my core pitch, but let's go over some of the story beats if you're still with me. We already touched on the main idea for the reboot with the new kids being partnered with the 5 remaining holy Digimon searching for Tai, but I'll use this final section to expand on some story points and beats I would make happen in our reboot. I mentioned it earlier, but I like the idea of the series taking place over the summer just to give it some distinct personality and to justify why nobody is really in school, why the original crew is broken up the way they are, and why the new kids will be able to travel around Japan to meet up with Matt, meet Meiko, then travel to places like America to meet Willis. Episode 1 will start with TK and Kari still in Tokyo learning from from Izzy that Tai hasn't returned from a digital portal trip. That's when we get a report of a Digimon battle downtown with a human that looks a lot like Tai. When TK and Kari get there, it's not Tai, but Davis with his Digimon partner Vmon. That's the first episode and our intro to Davis and Vmon, and establishes that the original cast is all split up for the summer. The next handful of episodes would introduce Yoli and Cody, Armor Evolutions, the Control Spires, and Digimon Emperor, stuff from the original series. We may get hints of Tai and little moments with Joe and Sora. TK could definitely call Mad and maybe even Mimi, so we get to see familiar faces. We'll do a version of the Digimon Emperor story that is pretty faithful to the original, but I actually want to make it so that Argamon from Adventure 2020 is the returning villain and the one who manipulated or corrupted Ken into becoming the Digimon Emperor. Argamon was really our first ever villain in the reboot series, and even though he came back for a bit near the end of that first show, Abatamon and Millenniummon definitely stole the show and were the more primal evils. Argamon was kind of Diaboromon's replacement when Digimon Adventure 2020 adapted the R Wargame story, so we could use Argamon and his return for introducing Willis and doing a Revenge of Diaboromon adaptation, you know, Revenge of Argamon, for the finale. Side note, I know that Diaboromon being tied to Kokomon and Willis is strictly an English dub thing, but I think it works great. We could get the return of iconic 02 characters like Arukenimon, Mummymon, and even Black War Greymon. They could easily come back as servants of Argamon instead. But after the Digimon Emperor is dethroned, we leave Tokyo, first visiting Matt in the countryside where we meet another kid from rural Japan with the Digimon, Meiko. Think of this as a light version of the world tour stuff from the original 02. She doesn't have to come back with us to Tokyo, but is now on our radar and will return later in the series. We then adapt Hurricane Touchdown into a full arc with the team going to America, meeting Mimi in New York, discovering Willis and his situation. We can potentially have Ken with us this time, so the dynamics are a little different than the original movie, which Ken wasn't a part of. We'll of course have to acknowledge the fact that we met Lopmon in Adventure 2020, but this wouldn't be too hard. It's not impossible to imagine Lopmon found its way into the human world, or that Willis found his way into the digital world in those 2 years between shows. Terriermon will also be here in some capacity. Like Meiko though, Willis, Lopmon, and Terriermon don't need to come back to Tokyo with us necessarily, but we have forged this bond, saved another holy Digimon, and basically Willis will say, "Thanks guys, call us when you need us," that kind of thing. When it comes time for the final arc and finale, it's a no-brainer. I think we can adapt Revenge of Diaboromon as our big ending. Just make it Revenge of Argamon. This is one of my all-time favorite Digimon movies and would work great as the finale to the new 02 reboot story we're telling. Those little Argamon jellies are invading Tokyo, which is fitting since the jellies were all over episode 1 of Digimon 2020. Only now, instead of the internet, they're actually in the real world. It's a citywide event to find and stop Argamon. We have the 02 kids working in the real world with the original kids working online to find Argamon and stop it. Tai is finally back in action, so we can get Omnimon, but just like that movie, Omnimon will lose, leaving it to the new generation to defeat Argamon in the Bay of Odaiba. We get the Omni Sword, Imperial Dramon Paladin mode, and that's Argamon gone for good. So there you go, that is my pitch for how I would write a sequel to Digimon Adventure 2020, the reboot of 02, borrowing characters and plot points from Adventure 2020, from the original 02, even from Try, and from the 02 movies like Hurricane Touchdown and Revenge of Diaboromon. To summarize, Tai is missing and the original Digidestined are broken up for the summer, leaving TK, Kari, and Izzy to assemble a new team involving newcomers Davis, Yoli, and Cody. They save Tai from the Digimon Emperor and learn of Argamon's return, at which point they realize they'll need all 7 holy Digimon to stop the threat, leading them to go on a world tour where they meet Meiko in rural Japan and Willis in America. With the reincarnated versions of all 7 holy Digimon plus Ken and Wormmon, they stop Argamon in the digital world, but he flees into the real world Tokyo, where we essentially recreate the Revenge of Diaboromon film but stretch it out into a multi-episode storyline involving both generations of Digidestined stopping Argamon once and for all. As this is a rough outline of what I would do, I didn't cover every single plot point in detail like Jogress/DNA Digivolution, but it would still happen, likely in between the Hurricane Touchdown America arc and the Revenge of Argamon finale arc. Also, there could be more stops along the world tour, not just rural Japan and America. Maybe we visit other countries and meet other kids with Digimon, just like in the original 02. But when we learn their partners aren't holy Digimon reincarnated, we kind of politely move on to the next part of the world, until we find our missing 2 and get all 7. Let me know your thoughts on this 2022 pitch. For the record, I don't think this is like a masterpiece, perfect story pitch, but I wanted to share it all with you. If you have any ideas to add on to my pitch, or if you have your own take on how they could possibly do a 02 remake set in the current day, please leave a comment below. If you want more 02 discussion, we are getting a sneak peek of the new 02 movie set in the original timeline after Last Evolution Kizuna. That sneak peek should be dropping on July 30th. I'm sure we'll discuss that on the channel, so be sure to subscribe for that. Like the video if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.